Before we dive in, if you love epic tales of war, strategy, hit that subscribe and like button, turn on notifications, and join our growing legion of warriors. Now, let's begin. The human, Lieutenant David Kessler, awoke to the sound of distant thunder, except there was no storm. His head throbbed, his body ached, and as his vision focused, he realized the truth. His ship had crashed. Smoke billowed from the wreckage of the Atlas IX, its twisted metal remains scattered across an alien jungle. His emergency beacon was destroyed, his communicator cracked beyond repair. He was alone. Pain seared through his left arm, forcing him to look down. His sleeve was torn, revealing a deep puncture wound just below his bicep. Dark veins were spreading outward from the wound, pulsing with an eerie blue glow. Poison. The memory struck him like a hammer. During the crash, he had stumbled out of the burning wreckage, only to be attacked by something, a creature from this unknown world. He barely remembered the attack, only the sharp, needle-like fangs sinking into his arm before he managed to kill the thing with his survival knife. Its body still lay nearby, a long, chitinous serpent with 6 legs and 2 sets of mandibles, its body covered in bioluminescent patches. He didn't know what kind of venom it had injected him with, but it was acting fast. His fingers were already going numb, his heart pounding in irregular bursts. He needed to neutralize it. Now. David rummaged through his survival pack, but the medkit had been ruined in the crash. Vials shattered, antidotes lost. His only remaining supplies were water, emergency rations, and a field knife. No anti-venom. No medical help. No hope. His vision blurred. He staggered against the wreckage, gasping as the poison burned through his bloodstream like wildfire. He had minutes, maybe less, before it reached his heart. Then, something moved in the foliage. At first, he thought it was another creature coming to finish him off. But as his eyesight refocused, he saw something else. Someone else. A tall, humanoid alien emerged from the dense undergrowth, its skin a deep shade of violet, eyes glowing amber in the dim light. It wore something resembling armor, organic yet sleek, like exoskeletal plating. A weapon hung at its hip, but its most striking feature was its elongated fingers, tipped with sharp claw-like points, and the way it moved. With intelligence, with caution. David's instinct screamed danger, but his body was failing. He collapsed to one knee, breathing ragged. The alien studied him for a long moment, its eyes flicking from his wrecked ship to the poisoned wound on his arm. Then, without a word, it stepped forward. David tried to move, but his limbs wouldn't respond. The poison was winning. His vision darkened. The last thing he saw was the alien reaching toward him. Then, blackness. David's world flickered between consciousness and oblivion. He felt weightless, detached, his body no longer his own. His mind swam through the haze of venom-induced fever. Yet somewhere in the fog, he felt something. Movement. The alien was carrying him. His limp form was slung over the creature's shoulder, its grip firm but careful. The jungle blurred past in streaks of green and violet as it moved with uncanny speed, navigating the dense foliage effortlessly. David's fingers twitched. His breath came in ragged gasps. He was still alive. But for how long? Then, through his blurred vision, he saw it. A structure, hidden within the jungle. Unlike the natural terrain, this was artificial. A shelter, a dwelling, maybe even a research station. The entrance shimmered as the alien passed through an unseen energy field, and suddenly, they were inside. The world steadied. Cool air replaced the jungle humidity. Strange, luminous technology lined the walls, casting soft blue light over the smooth, dark surfaces. The place was advanced, yet organic in design. Every edge curved, every piece of machinery pulsing with life. The alien laid him down on what seemed to be a medical platform, then stepped away, its sharp eyes locked onto his wound. David barely managed to lift his head, his voice a dry whisper. "Help. Me." The alien tilted its head, observing. Then, with deliberate movements, it retrieved a device from the wall, a sleek, metallic instrument that hummed with energy. David's pulse pounded. Was this a cure? A weapon? Would it heal him, or was this alien about to end his suffering in the most efficient way possible? The alien knelt beside him, activating the device. A scanning light washed over his arm, revealing the venom's rapid progression. The glowing blue infection had spread past his shoulder now, inching toward his chest. Minutes. He had minutes. Then the alien spoke, for the first time. Its voice was deep yet melodic, its language completely alien. But somehow, he understood the intent. Your fluids, the key. David blinked. His fevered mind struggled to process the words. Had he misheard? His fluids. What the hell did that mean? The alien seemed to realize his confusion and switched tactics. It grabbed a vial, filled it, with a small sample of his blood, and inserted it into the device. Holographic symbols appeared in the air, shifting rapidly. The alien's gaze sharpened as it analyzed the results. And then, something changed. Its expression, previously neutral, hardened. Urgency flickered in its glowing amber eyes. It spoke again, this time with absolute certainty. Your own body can fight it, but you must give it more. David felt his heart skip a beat. Was the alien suggesting his own biological fluids could neutralize the venom? His own blood, plasma, something inside him was the antidote? It made no sense, yet at the same time, it did. The creature that bit him wasn't from Earth. Its venom had no antidote in human medicine, but his immune system might already be adapting. If the alien was right, if his body could counteract the poison, then he needed to accelerate the process. David gritted his teeth. There was only one way to do that. He reached toward his waist, fingers fumbling for his field knife. The alien watched, unmoving. He hesitated, only for a second, before pressing the blade against his opposite arm, and he cut. A sharp gasp tore from his throat as his own blood spilled onto the wound. The moment it mixed with the venom, something reacted, a violent sizzle, a pulse of energy. The darkened veins shuddered, and for a split second he thought he had made things worse. But then, relief. The pain didn't disappear, but it dulled. The spread of the infection slowed. The alien nodded, its expression unreadable. It retrieved a second device, this one a hollow needle, and pressed it against his uninjured arm. A slight pinch, and David realized what it was doing, extracting more of his blood. A mixture of David's own fluids was prepared in seconds, processed through the alien's technology. Then, without hesitation, the alien injected the solution directly into his poisoned bloodstream. The effect was immediate. Heat surged through his veins. His heart pounded as if struck by lightning, his muscles tensed, and for a terrifying moment, he thought his body might reject the treatment. But then, clarity. The haze lifted. The burning subsided. The unnatural glow in his veins began to fade. He wasn't cured yet, but he was stabilizing. The alien watched intently as his breathing steadied. Then, for the first time since their encounter, it spoke again. You will survive. David exhaled, exhaustion washing over him. He wasn't sure whether to thank the alien, fear it, or question how it knew so much about his biology. But one thing was clear. He owed this creature his life, and he still had no idea who or what it was. David sat up slowly, his body aching, but the worst of the poison had receded. He felt more lucid, the buzzing in his head clearing as the alien's treatment took full effect. The glowing veins in his arm had faded, and though a dull pain remained, it was nothing compared to what he had endured just moments before. He felt like he might live, but he wasn't sure for how long. The alien remained silent, watching him. Its amber eyes never left his form, calculating, studying. The vast knowledge in those eyes was unsettling, as though it knew far more about him than he could possibly comprehend. It was both an ally and a mystery. David took a shaky breath, his voice hoarse. Who? What are you? The alien didn't respond right away. Instead, it tilted its head slightly, observing him with a strange intensity. It was as if it was weighing his worth, deciding if it could trust him. Finally, It spoke in a language David couldn't understand. But something shifted. The words came with an emotional resonance that, for the briefest of moments, he understood. The alien had doubts. David's mind raced. Maybe it was his survival instinct. Maybe it was the alien's strange presence, but he found the words slipping from his lips before he even realized it. "I'm not going to hurt you." The alien paused. Its eyes glowed with an almost unreadable expression. Then, after what felt like an eternity, it nodded. "I am Enrock." David blinked. It wasn't an answer to his question, but it was a start. The alien, the creature that had just saved his life, was named Enrock. David swallowed, wiping his brow. I need to know what happened to my ship, Enrock. How did you find me?" Enrock seemed to consider the question, but instead of speaking immediately, it gestured for David to follow. The alien led him deeper into its hidden facility. The walls hummed with energy as the floor seemed to shift beneath their feet, creating an almost living environment. The entire structure was alive in a way, pulsating with faint light and organic rhythm. It was a stark contrast to the cold, mechanical technology David had grown up with. Everything in this place felt as though it had evolved in perfect harmony with the planet itself. Finally, they reached a room unlike anything David had ever seen. The walls were covered with shimmering screens, and holographic maps floated in midair. Alien symbols surrounded the room, constantly shifting and changing, like a never-ending puzzle. "This is where my people," Enrock began, his voice somber. "Study the galaxy." David's brow furrowed. "Your people?" Enrock's eyes softened for a moment, but the pain behind them was evident. "We are the Virii. We were once a mighty civilization, long before you, long before your species even existed. But we were deceived. We made mistakes. Our greed led us to the brink of extinction. Now we wander the stars, searching for purpose, searching for a way to redeem ourselves." David was stunned into silence. This wasn't just any alien. Enrock wasn't an explorer or a mere wanderer. It seemed as though he and his people were running from their past. The Virii, a civilization with a history of power and greed, now reduced to wandering the stars, seeking redemption. "So, what happened to your people?" David asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Rock didn't look at him at first. Instead, he stared at one of the floating maps, which displayed a series of blinking lights across a distant section of the galaxy. He exhaled slowly, the weight of the question clearly affecting him. "We were consumed by our own ambitions," he said, his voice a quiet tremor. "We sought to harness the power of the stars themselves, but we failed. The consequences were catastrophic. The stars themselves grew unstable. Our civilization began to collapse. Those who survived scattered, hiding from our own creation. We call it the stellar rupture." David's mind spun. He had never heard of such an event, but the way Enrock described it, the very idea of causing the collapse of stars, it was impossible to grasp. "The stellar rupture," David repeated, the name settling heavily in the air. "And now you're the last of your kind?" Enrock turned to him. His amber eyes were full of a mixture of pain and resolve. "I am not the last. There are others who still live, but we are few. And every day we search for a way to undo the damage we caused. To restore the balance." David processed the words in silence. What did it mean for a civilization to destroy the very stars they had once worshipped? What kind of suffering did it take to erase an entire species' legacy, to force them into exile among the stars? But there was one question that still burned in his mind. "Why did you help me?" Enrock didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned back to the map, pointing to a distant star system marked with a bright, flashing red light. "Because, Lieutenant Kessler, we are not the only ones who have been changed by the stars. Your people, your species, will face the same fate." David stared at the map, following the alien's gaze. The answer, although still unclear, was beginning to take shape. The Virii weren't just survivors of a lost civilization. They were warning him, and David realized that the stakes were much higher than his own survival. David sat still, trying to absorb Enrock's words, but they felt too heavy. too beyond his understanding. A galaxy-spanning civilization destroyed. By their own hubris? A warning that humanity was headed down the same path? He shook his head, trying to clear the fog that had settled over his thoughts. He was just a soldier, a simple human, stranded on a planet far from Earth, battling a venomous creature in the middle of a jungle. Yet, here he was, on the brink of something far larger than he could comprehend. "Are you saying the stellar rupture is coming for us?" David finally asked, his voice breaking through the silence. Narak didn't respond immediately. He stepped forward, his glowing amber eyes never leaving David's face. The alien reached out and activated a nearby console, which projected a holographic map of the galaxy, a complex web of stars and systems stretching out before them. As David watched, a small red light blinked on the map. "This is the point of origin," Narak's voice was low but sharp. "Where it began. A single star, consumed by ambition. When we tried to control the energy of that star, it unleashed a cataclysm, one we did not foresee." David stared at the light. It pulsed like a warning beacon, growing more intense. It was like something alive, a signal of impending doom. The more he stared at it, the more it felt like a direct challenge. "Wait a minute," David interjected, narrowing his eyes. This doesn't make sense. How does this even concern humanity? We're just starting to explore the stars. We're not even close to the level of technology you're talking about." Enrak's eyes flicked over to him. "Your species is growing fast. Too fast. Your technology has progressed exponentially. You are reaching toward the stars. But, like us, you are blind to the cost. The stars are not just objects to be exploited. They are alive in ways you cannot yet fathom. And when you begin to tamper with forces beyond your understanding, you will be met with the same fate we suffered." David's heart raced. The weight of Enrak's words pressed down on him. The alien's warning sounded like something straight out of a myth. A cautionary tale of what happens when a species grows too ambitious. But something inside him refused to accept it. He was just a soldier. He didn't have the luxury of worrying about the fate of an entire species. He needed to focus on surviving, on getting back to Earth and completing his mission. "Okay, so what do you want from me?" David asked. "You helped me survive. What's next?" Enrak's expression softened slightly, but there was still an undercurrent of urgency in his voice. "I want you to understand that your species is at a crossroads. You have a choice to make. Humanity can rise above the mistakes of those who came before, or you can follow the same path. But I cannot make that decision for you." David felt a chill run down his spine. He had never imagined that a simple accident, a crash on a foreign planet, would lead him into this conversation. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized just how much humanity had yet to learn. Narak wasn't just a stranger, he was a survivor. A living relic of a civilization that had once reached for the stars, only to fall into ruin. And now he was warning humanity, warning David about the consequences of their unchecked ambition. David took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "So, what's the plan? How do I stop it? How do we stop it?" Enrak's gaze softened, even further, and for the first time, David saw a flicker of something akin to hope in the alien's eyes. "I believe you may be the key." David blinked in surprise. "Me?" he repeated, his voice thick with disbelief. "I'm just a soldier, a human." Enrak's eyes were steady as he spoke. "You are not just a soldier. You are part of something much larger. The knowledge we have is fragmented, but we have identified a way to alter the trajectory of the impending catastrophe. It requires a new perspective. It requires someone who still has the will to change." David couldn't help but feel a sense of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He wasn't just stranded on an alien world anymore. He wasn't just fighting to survive. He was part of something bigger, something that could alter the course of humanity's future. But the weight of that responsibility was almost suffocating. "Why? Me?" he asked again, his voice barely more than a whisper. Narak turned toward him, his expression resolute. "Because you still have hope." David stared at the alien, the words sinking deep into his mind. Hope. He wasn't sure how long that hope would last or what it would ultimately cost. But for the first time since his crash, he knew that his journey had just begun. The future of humanity rested in the choices they made, and whether or not they could learn from the mistakes of those who had come before. And now, David Kessler was part of that equation. The journey to understand Enrach's cryptic words was beginning to weigh heavily on David. The alien's warning still echoed in his mind, a constant reminder of what was at stake. Humanity, just beginning to spread its wings across the stars, had no idea of the cosmic dangers it was tempting. Yet, David had no time to waste. Enrach had made it clear, humanity's future depended on action, not speculation. David was no scientist, no historian, but in the weeks that followed, he learned. Enrach, though cryptic and enigmatic, had opened a door to a vast wealth of knowledge, one that stretched far beyond what Earth had ever conceived. The alien, though a shadow of his former self, carried the memories and data of a species that had touched the very fabric of the universe. And now, that knowledge was in David's hands. The two worked together, studying star maps, analyzing anomalies, and learning about the cosmic forces that had once shaped Enrach's people. The more they delved into the data, the clearer the warning became. Humanity was close, closer than it knew, to making the same catastrophic mistakes. David had learned of a weapon, the very one that had caused the stellar rupture. A device designed to harness the energy of a star, to control it. But the price had been steep. The star was destroyed, its energy drained, triggering a chain reaction that devastated the Virese civilization. It was an act of desperation, an attempt to cheat the laws of nature, and it had nearly wiped them out. "I can't believe this," David said, shaking his head as he scrolled through one of the holographic records. How could they have been so blind? Enrach's gaze remained steady. It is the nature of all intelligent beings to reach beyond their grasp. But it is the consequences of those actions that define us. David stopped pacing and stared at the alien. His voice dropped to a low murmur, barely above a whisper. "So this is it? Humanity has a choice. Either we destroy ourselves or we—" He trailed off, unsure of how to finish. "You must choose to resist," Enrach said softly. "Resist the temptation to manipulate the stars. Resist the urge to control what should remain beyond your reach." David stood at the edge of the control room, his eyes following the star systems on the holographic display. He could see the patterns, the moments of expansion, the rapid technological growth of Earth. Humanity was progressing at an unprecedented rate, just as the Viri had once done. But in their speed, they had overlooked the fragility of it all, the delicate balance between growth and destruction. "The technology we're developing," David said slowly. "The engines, the energy, manipulation. It's exactly what you warned about, isn't it?" Enrach nodded gravely. "Yes, Lieutenant Kessler, and you must be the one to stop it." David had no answers for that. He wasn't a savior. He wasn't a leader. He was just a soldier who had been stranded on a distant planet, fighting for his life. Yet, in the alien's eyes, David saw something else. A recognition that he could make a difference. But what kind of difference? What kind of sacrifice would it take? The next few days were a blur. The two spent every waking moment working to uncover a solution, a way to redirect humanity's future, without falling into the same traps that the Viri had. It wasn't easy, it wasn't quick. But as David's understanding grew, so did his sense of purpose. The truth, however, was starting to settle on him like a cold weight. The solution required sacrifice, a personal one, the kind that could cost him everything. He couldn't ignore it any longer. One evening, as Enrach showed him a final piece of technology, the device that could change the course of humanity's future, David saw the cost for what it truly was. The device, a stellar stabilizer, could be used to shift the trajectory of humanity's path. It would prevent the same mistake that the Viri had made. But it required a power source, an energy source that could only be obtained through the destruction of a star. David's heart sank as he realized the implication. To save humanity, he would need to make a choice, a terrible choice. The device would only work if someone or something gave up their life force, their essence, to power it. The very energy of life would fuel the stabilization, and David had already figured out that this energy would have to come from him. "What do you want me to do, Inrak?" David asked, his voice raw. The alien looked at him with a kind of sad understanding, as though he had seen this moment coming for far longer than David had. "The choice is yours, Lieutenant. The device will work, but it requires you to give up everything. Your life, your future." David was silent for a long time. His eyes shifted from the holographic image of the star system to the device. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him. His entire life, everything he had worked for, had led him to this moment. The future of humanity lay in his hands, but so did his own. Could he really give up everything for the sake of an entire species? And then, he realized, there was no other choice. Humanity couldn't afford to make the same mistake. He had seen the devastation of unchecked ambition, and he knew that unless humanity changed its course, they would be consumed by it. Just as the Viri had been. "I'll do it," David said, his voice steady, resolute. "For humanity, for the future." Narak said nothing. He simply nodded, his expression unreadable. But David could feel it. The weight of history pressing against him. This wasn't just about survival. It was about ensuring that humanity would not fall prey to the same fate that had consumed the Viri. And so, with no other choice, David Kessler began the final steps toward a sacrifice that would change everything. The time had come. The air in the control room felt thick, oppressive, as though the very walls were closing in on David. Every minute, every second that ticked by seemed to magnify the weight of the decision he had already made. Humanity's future rested on his shoulders, and in this moment, there was no going back. No second chances. David stood before the stellar stabilizer, the device that could potentially alter the course of history. The alien technology was unlike anything he had ever seen, sleek, sophisticated, and powerful, yet seemingly fragile. The glowing blue core pulsed gently, as if alive, waiting for the final push. He knew what needed to be done. But even now, with everything at stake, the reality of his decision was almost too much to bear. Would his death really be the only way? Would this final act of sacrifice ensure that humanity wouldn't fall prey to the same fate as the Viri? The thought gnawed at his mind, the doubts creeping into every corner of his consciousness. He turned toward Narak, who had stood silently by, his expression unreadable. The alien had shared everything he could. The knowledge, the warnings, the technology. But now it was David who had to make the ultimate sacrifice. The cosmic balance of life and death, of creation and destruction, had to be restored, and David Kessler, the human soldier, was the key to that balance. And Rock's amber eyes never wavered. "Are you certain, Lieutenant? Once the process begins, there is no turning back." David nodded, swallowing hard. "I have no choice, Rock. Humanity has no choice. We can't afford to become the next Viri. We can't afford to fall into the same trap." His voice was steady, but inside, a whirlwind of emotions raged. Fear, anger, regret. But beneath it all, there was one unshakable truth. The survival of the species required a sacrifice, and he was the one chosen to make it. "It's time," Enrock said softly. David stepped forward, his hand hovering over the glowing console. He could feel the power radiating from the device, the energy that would be released if he activated it. In that moment, he realized just how much he was about to lose. His life, his future, everything he had known and hoped for. But the thought of humanity's potential, of saving those he would never see again, was what pushed him forward. With a deep breath, he pressed the button. The stabilizer hummed to life, its core glowing brighter and brighter. The process was excruciating. David felt the life force draining from his body as the stabilizer drew upon him, siphoning the very essence of his existence. Pain shot through his veins like fire, his muscles convulsing with the weight of the power being extracted. But he did not scream. He could not. The greater good was at stake. As the energy poured into the device, he felt himself fading, the world around him becoming increasingly distant. The pain was unbearable, but still, He held on, knowing that with every passing second, humanity's fate was shifting. Nrak watched silently, his face a mask of solemn understanding. He had warned David of the cost, but even he could not have prepared the human for what was to come. The stabilizer was working, yes, but David's body was beginning to break down. His organs, his cells, were being drained of the energy needed to power the device. The process was a final one, a last irreversible act of selflessness. Minutes felt like hours. David's vision blurred, and his breath came in shallow gasps. Yet through the pain, through the suffocating weight of the energy being drained from him, he held on. "Hold on, David," Nrak's voice echoed in his mind. "It is almost over. You have done it. You have saved them." David's mind struggled to cling to the words, but the truth was clearer than ever. He was giving everything for a future he would never see. The stabilizer pulsed one last time, and David's consciousness flickered. He could feel his body weakening, but his spirit, his humanity, refused to fade. With one final breath, David Kessler did the unimaginable. He became part of the cosmic balance, the sacrifice that would ensure humanity's survival. The stabilizer powered down, and the device hummed to a quiet, gentle stop. The star systems blinked, as if in acknowledgement. The threat had been neutralized. The future had been saved, and David was gone. David's death was not in vain. The stabilizer had worked. The cosmic force that had once threatened to unravel humanity's future was now contained, its destructive potential sealed away for good. The star systems, once at risk of devastation, had been redirected, their paths stabilized by the very sacrifice of one human soldier. David Kessler had become a legend, a name whispered in reverence by those who would never know the price he paid, but the world and the universe was not the same. Nrak stood alone in the control room, the flickering light from the now dormant stabilizer casting long shadows across the alien technology. His eyes, though ancient, were filled with sorrow. He had seen countless civilizations rise and fall, but the selflessness of one human had left an indelible mark on his soul. David Kessler had given up everything to save a species he would never see thrive. For Nrak, there was nothing more powerful than that sacrifice, and for the first time, he felt the weight of the Viri's actions more than ever before. In their desperation to control, to bend the stars to their will, they had lost their way. But David had chosen a different path, one of humility, one that would ensure humanity's place in the stars, without the need for domination or destruction. The alien felt a strange flicker of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, humanity would learn from the past. Perhaps they would not repeat the mistakes of those who had come before. The journey was not over. David had laid the groundwork for something greater, a new chapter in the story of humanity, a chapter that would hopefully be defined by wisdom and balance, rather than greed and ruin. Nrak's mind drifted to the legacy David would leave behind. The human soldier, the unlikely hero, would be remembered. His sacrifice would shape the future. And though the galaxy was vast and full of dangers, humanity would now walk with its eyes open, aware of the fragile nature of existence. Back on Earth, the news spread like wildfire. The mysterious disappearance of Lieutenant David Kessler had been quickly followed by reports of a cosmic phenomenon, an energetic shift that had altered the course of nearby star systems. Governments scrambled to piece together what had happened, but the truth was more profound than anyone could comprehend. The stabilizer had been activated, its effects rippling through the cosmos. The world did not know it yet, but humanity had been saved, not by science, not by power, but by the sacrifice of one man. Memorials were held, not just on Earth but across the colonies humanity had begun to establish. David Kessler's name became synonymous with selflessness and courage. His story was passed down through generations, a reminder that sometimes the greatest power lies in letting go, in giving everything for the greater good. Years passed. Technology advanced. New frontiers were reached. Yet the shadow of David's sacrifice lingered, like a guiding star in the night sky. Those who knew the truth of his death felt a deep responsibility to honor it, to ensure that the mistakes of the past were not repeated. Humanity's journey among the stars would be defined by restraint, by a careful balance between power and wisdom. And then, a strange thing happened. As humanity's influence stretched across the galaxy, whispers of David's sacrifice began to echo in other corners of space. Civilizations, older, wiser, and far more advanced, took notice. The Virii, the ancient race that had once sought to dominate the cosmos, heard the tale of the human who had given everything to prevent their fate. And they began to wonder, could it be possible? Could a species so young, so brash, actually learn from the past? It was too early to tell. But one thing was certain. Humanity's place in the universe had changed forever. And perhaps, just perhaps, the galaxy was beginning to heal. The legacy of David Kessler would live on, not just in the records of Earth, but in the very fabric of the stars. The galaxy had changed. The ripples from David Kessler's sacrifice echoed through space, touching the lives of countless beings. But what of humanity? What was the true cost of David's selflessness? And what would the future hold for a species that had witnessed its darkest hour and emerged from it with a new sense of purpose? Years passed since the activation of the stabilizer, and Earth had entered a new era. The colonies, once hesitant, unsure of their place in the cosmos, now thrived. Humanity had reached a turning point, where the lessons learned from the past were shaping the very way they approached the stars. The once reckless desire for expansion had been tempered with wisdom, and the thirst for dominance had been replaced by a yearning for understanding. The memory of David Kessler was engraved in every colonial council, in every space mission, and in the hearts of those who had learned the true meaning of sacrifice. The Council of the Federation, a body formed by the United Colonies of Humanity, now carried the banner of David's legacy. His story was taught in schools, etched into the very foundation of the Federation's values. He had become the symbol of what humanity could be at its best, a species capable of great power, yes, but also of unimaginable compassion. But for Enrock, the question remained. Was humanity truly ready to rise beyond its primal instincts? Could they, like David had shown, embrace their power without succumbing to the darker side of ambition? The Virii had been a testament to the dangers of unchecked dominance. Now, humanity had to walk a fine line, a line David Kessler had made clear. Enrock, an alien who had witnessed civilizations rise and fall for millennia, was more hopeful than ever. The human spirit had a resilience to it, a fire that no amount of destruction could ever quench. The galaxy was watching. A generation had passed since David's death, and as the Federation grew stronger, whispers of his sacrifice reached the ears of distant civilizations. There were those who questioned the power of humans, their ability to shape their destiny, to walk the fine line between progress and destruction. They had seen how quickly humanity had expanded, how quickly they had adapted, but they had also seen their potential for violence and recklessness. In the council chambers of the Galactic Confederation, a gathering of the universe's most influential species, there was debate. What should be done about the human race? Some factions, wary of humanity's explosive growth, feared the same fate that had befallen the Virii. Would they too fall victim to their own ambitions? But others, inspired by the story of David Kessler, saw the possibility for a new kind of future, a future where humans could be the guardians of the universe, not its conquerors, where David's sacrifice would be a guiding light for a new era of cooperation and peace among the stars. The conflict was intense, but one thing was undeniable. The story of David Kessler had inspired change, even in the hearts of the galaxy's oldest civilizations. It was no longer just about the survival of humanity. It was about a new path forward, one that recognized the importance of balance, self-restraint, and unity. As the Council voted on humanity's future role in the galactic community, Nrock stood in the background, silently observing. His mind drifted to David once more. The human soldier had not just saved his species. He had saved them all. Perhaps, Enrock mused, perhaps humanity will be the ones to show us the way after all. The vote passed, and humanity's place in the galaxy was secured. But the true victory was not in the decision of the Council. The true victory was in the legacy left by David Kessler, a legacy that would shape the universe for generations to come. David had given his life for the future, and in doing so, He had ensured that the future would remember him, not as a soldier, not as a hero, but as a symbol of what it meant to be human. His story, his sacrifice, would live on forever, etched into the fabric of the stars. And so, as humanity continued to explore the vastness of space, they did so with purpose. They knew that with great power came great responsibility. And they had learned that sometimes the greatest strength lay in sacrifice. David Kessler's death was not the end of his story. It was merely the beginning of a new era for humanity. A chapter defined by humility, courage, and a relentless pursuit of balance. The stars had not only witnessed his sacrifice, they had been changed by it.